Rebecca had always been the kind of person who kept things to herself. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, she'd learned early on that some things were better left unsaid. But this was different. This wasn't gossip or a minor embarrassment. This was something that had been eating away at her for 3 long years, and she couldn't tell a single soul about it. It started small, like most problems do. A little discomfort here, an odd sensation there, nothing that seemed worth mentioning to anyone, not even her husband. But over time, it grew worse. The pain became sharper, more frequent. There were other symptoms, too. Ones that made her cheeks burn with shame just thinking about them. She'd tried to ignore it, hoping it would go away on its own. She'd tried home remedies she found online in the middle of sleepless nights. She'd even tried praying about it, asking for the strength to just push through. Nothing worked. By the time she turned 34, Rebecca's entire life had quietly rearranged itself around this condition she couldn't name out loud. She'd become an expert at making excuses. When her best friend Tracy called to invite her to their monthly girls' night, Rebecca would suddenly remember a work deadline or claim she was coming down with something. When her sister organized family dinners, Rebecca would show up late and leave early, never quite comfortable enough to relax. The hardest part was with Michael, her husband of 8 years. Michael was a good man, patient, kind, the type who still brought her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, but lately there had been a distance growing between them, a gap she'd created but couldn't explain. She'd been avoiding his touch, making excuses when he reached for her in the darkness of their bedroom. She could see the hurt in his eyes, the confusion. He probably thought she didn't love him anymore. The truth was so much more complicated than that, and so much more humiliating. One night, after she'd once again turned away from his embrace, Michael sat on the edge of their bed with his back to her. "Is it me?" he asked quietly. "Did I do something wrong?" Rebecca felt her heart break a little. "No," she whispered. "It's not you. I promise it's not you." "Then what is it? Talk to me, Beck." We used to tell each other everything. But she couldn't. The words stuck in her throat like they always did. How could she explain something so personal, so embarrassing? Even to the man she'd promised to share her life with, she couldn't find the courage. So she said nothing, and the silence stretched between them like an ocean. She had gone to her regular doctor about a year into dealing with this. Dr. Patterson had been her family physician for over a decade, a stern older man who seemed perpetually rushed. She'd sat in his office trying to work up the nerve to explain what was happening. When she finally managed to stammer out a few vague symptoms, he'd barely looked up from his computer screen. "Sounds like stress," he'd said, typing something into her file. "Are you under a lot of pressure at work? Home life okay?" Rebecca had nodded, feeling her face flush with embarrassment. She'd tried to explain that it felt like more than stress, but he'd already moved on, printing out a prescription for antidepressants. "Give these a try for a few months. Get more exercise, maybe take up yoga. You'd be surprised how much anxiety can manifest physically in women your age." Women your age, as if 33 had been ancient. As if her concerns were just typical female hysteria. She'd left his office feeling smaller than when she'd entered, clutching a prescription she never filled. The pills still sat in her bathroom drawer, a reminder of that failed attempt at getting help. After that, Rebecca had convinced herself she could handle it alone. She adjusted her life around the pain and discomfort. She wore certain clothes that helped. She planned her days carefully, avoiding situations that might make things worse. She became a master of adaptation, even as the condition itself refused to adapt or improve. But adaptation only works for so long. Eventually, you run out of room to maneuver. For Rebecca, that moment came on a Thursday evening in late October. She'd been making dinner, something simple, just pasta and a salad. Michael was due home from work any minute. She'd been stirring the sauce when the pain hit, sudden and sharp like someone had driven a knife deep into her lower abdomen. She gasped, dropping the wooden spoon. It clattered against the stove, sending red sauce splattering across the white countertop. Rebecca gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles going white. The pain was unlike anything she'd experienced before. It radiated through her entire body, making her legs weak and her vision blur. She tried to breathe through it, counting in her head like she'd taught herself to do. 1, 2, 3, 4. But this time the counting didn't help. She didn't hear Michael come in. Didn't hear him call her name. The next thing she knew, he was there beside her, his arm around her waist, holding her up. "Rebecca." What's wrong? Talk to me. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Tears were streaming down her face, though she hadn't realized she was crying. I'm taking you to the hospital, Michael said, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Fear, yes, but also determination. A firmness that said he wouldn't take no for an answer this time. No, she managed to gasp out. Not the hospital, please. Then where? Beck, you need help. Right now. Through the fog of pain, Rebecca remembered something. A few weeks ago, Tracy had mentioned a specialist clinic on the other side of town. Her cousin had gone there for some issue, though Tracy had been vague about the details. The clinic supposedly had really good doctors who actually listened to patients. The clinic, Rebecca whispered. Riverside Specialty Clinic. Across town, Michael didn't argue. Within minutes, he'd turned off the stove, grabbed her purse and jacket, and was helping her to the car. The drive felt endless. Every bump in the road sent fresh waves of pain through her body. Michael kept glancing over at her, his jaw tight with worry. She wanted to tell him it would be okay. Wanted to explain everything, but the pain left no room for words. The clinic was in an older part of town, housed in a renovated brick building that had probably been a factory once. The parking lot was nearly empty in the evening light. Michael practically carried her through the doors into a waiting room that was surprisingly pleasant. Nothing like the sterile, impersonal emergency rooms she'd imagined. There was soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and a young woman at the reception desk who looked up with immediate concern when she saw them. She's in a lot of pain, Michael said, his voice tight. She needs to see someone right away. The receptionist didn't ask for insurance cards or make them fill out forms first. She picked up the phone, spoke quickly to someone, and then came around the desk. Dr. Rodriguez can see you now. Follow me. They moved through a hallway with warm beige walls decorated with nature photographs. The receptionist led them to a room and helped Rebecca onto an examination table covered with fresh paper. The doctor will be right in, she said gently, and then she was gone. Rebecca sat there, hunched over, arms wrapped around her middle. The pain was starting to ease slightly, just enough that she could think again, and with thought came the familiar wave of shame and anxiety. She was actually here. She was actually going to have to explain this to a stranger, to a doctor who would probably judge her, dismiss her, or worse, make her feel stupid for not coming in sooner. It's going to be okay, Michael said, standing beside her, his hand on her back. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. She wanted to believe him, but the words she needed to say felt impossible to speak. The door opened and a woman walked in. She was probably in her late 40s with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and warm brown eyes behind stylish glasses. She wore a white coat over casual clothes, and there was something immediately calming about her presence. Hello, I'm Dr. Rodriguez, she said, pulling up a rolling stool to sit at eye level with Rebecca. I understand you're experiencing significant pain.
Can you tell me what's been going on?
Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The words were right there, tangled up with 3 years of shame and fear and loneliness. Take your time, Dr. Rodriguez said quietly. There was no impatience in her voice, no judgment, just calm, genuine interest. There's nothing you can tell me that I haven't heard before, and I promise you, whatever it is, you don't need to feel embarrassed. But Rebecca did feel embarrassed, deeply, painfully embarrassed. She stared at her hands twisted together in her lap. Michael squeezed her shoulder gently, offering silent support. It's been 3 years, Rebecca finally whispered so quietly she wasn't sure anyone heard her. 3 years of pain? Dr. Rodriguez asked, leaning forward slightly. Rebecca nodded. Then, word by painful word, she began to speak. She told the doctor about the symptoms she'd been too ashamed to mention to anyone. About the pain that had been steadily growing worse. About how it had affected every aspect of her life, her relationships, her sense of self. The words came out halting and broken, punctuated by long pauses where she had to gather her courage to continue. Dr. Rodriguez listened to every word. She didn't interrupt, didn't look shocked or disgusted. She just listened, occasionally nodding or making a small note on her tablet. When Rebecca finally ran out of words, exhausted by the effort of speaking her truth, the doctor reached over and gently touched her hand. Thank you for trusting me with this, she said. I know how hard that was, and I want you to know that what you're experiencing is a real medical condition. It's not in your head, it's not caused by stress, and you absolutely shouldn't have been dealing with this alone for 3 years. Rebecca felt something crack inside her chest, a dam she'd built finally breaking. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but from pure relief. Someone believed her. Someone understood. As Dr. Rodriguez began a gentle examination, asking questions and explaining everything she was doing, Rebecca noticed small details about her. The watch on her wrist looked expensive, really expensive, the kind of thing Rebecca had only seen in magazine advertisements. And her shoes, visible when the doctor stood to reach for something, were clearly designer. It seemed odd for someone working in this modest clinic in a forgotten part of town. During a moment when Dr. Rodriguez stepped out to get something from another room, Rebecca glanced around. On the desk, partially hidden behind a computer monitor, was a photograph in a simple frame. It showed Dr. Rodriguez in an elegant evening gown, standing at what looked like a fancy gala. Holding a champagne glass and smiling at the camera, Rebecca leaned closer, squinting to read the small caption beneath the photo in what looked like a clipped newspaper article. Philanthropist Dr. Elena Rodriguez at the annual Children's Hospital benefit. Philanthropist? Rebecca's mind spun with questions. Why would a wealthy doctor, someone who clearly moved in high society circles, choose to work in a place like this? When Dr. Rodriguez returned, Rebecca was still staring at the photograph. The doctor followed her gaze and smiled. A soft, almost sad smile that held volumes of untold stories. "You're wondering why I'm here," Dr. Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. Rebecca felt her cheeks flush, embarrassed to be caught snooping. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize." Dr. Rodriguez sat back down on her stool, the photograph now between them like a bridge. "I had a patient once, years ago. She changed everything I understood about being a doctor, about what it means to truly help people. Would you like to hear her story?" Rebecca found herself nodding, curious despite everything else happening. There was something in the doctor's eyes, a depth of understanding that suggested this wasn't just small talk. This story mattered somehow. And as Dr. Rodriguez began to speak, Rebecca realized that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found someone who truly understood what it meant to suffer in silence, and more importantly, what it took to finally break free. Dr. Rodriguez settled back in her chair, and for a moment, she seemed to be looking at something far away, beyond the walls of the small examination room. Rebecca watched her, curious and still a bit dazed from finally speaking about her condition out loud. Michael stood quietly beside her, his hand still resting protectively on her shoulder. "Her name was Isabella," Dr. Rodriguez began, her voice softer now, more personal. "And 15 years ago, she was the person who cleaned the floors at Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital. I was working there at the time, one of their top specialists. I had a corner office on the 12th floor with a view of Central Park. My appointment book was filled months in advance, with the kind of patients who didn't blink at $1,000 consultation fees." Rebecca tried to imagine this woman in front of her, with her kind eyes and comfortable manner, in some fancy Manhattan office. It seemed almost impossible, yet the photograph on the desk suggested it was true. "I thought I was doing important work," Dr. Rodriguez continued, and in some ways I was. I helped a lot of people, but they were all people who could afford to be helped. People who had the best insurance or the money to pay out of pocket, or the connections to get them in to see me. She paused, her fingers absently touching the edge of her desk. Isabella wasn't one of those people. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Rebecca found herself leaning forward, drawn into the story despite her own discomfort and exhaustion. "I used to see her sometimes, late at night when I was leaving the hospital after a long day. She'd be pushing her cleaning cart down the hallway, emptying trash bins, mopping floors. We'd nod at each other, exchange a quick hello. She had this smile, even at 10 o'clock at night after hours of physical labor. She'd smile at you like you were the most important person she'd see all day." Dr. Rodriguez's expression shifted, clouds moving across a clear sky. "One evening I was leaving around 11. I'd had a particularly difficult day, lost in my own problems. I nearly walked right past her. But something made me stop. Maybe it was the way she was leaning against her cart or how pale she looked. I asked if she was okay. Rebecca could picture it perfectly. The gleaming hospital corridor, the tired doctor in expensive clothes, the cleaning woman trying to hide her pain. She told me she was fine, just a little tired, but I'd been a doctor long enough to know when someone was lying about their health. I pressed her a little, and finally she admitted she'd been having some problems, personal problems. The kind that made her uncomfortable to talk about, especially with someone like me. Someone like you? Rebecca heard herself ask. Dr. Rodriguez smiled, but it was a sad smile. A rich doctor who lived in a different world. That's how she saw me, and honestly, she wasn't wrong. But I convinced her to let me examine her, right there in an empty patient room. And what I found, she shook her head slowly. Rebecca, what I found was a condition that should have been treated years earlier. A condition not unlike what you're dealing with. Rebecca felt her breath catch. Michael's hand tightened slightly on her shoulder. The worst part was learning how long Isabella had been suffering.
7 years.
7 years of pain, embarrassment, isolation. She'd avoided doctors because she didn't have insurance. She'd been too ashamed to go to a free clinic, too afraid of being judged or not taken seriously. By the time I examined her, the damage was significant. We could treat it, help her, but there were complications that would affect her for the rest of her life. Dr. Rodriguez stood up and walked to the small window, looking out at the parking lot where the evening was deepening into night. I arranged for her to get the best care the hospital could provide. I pulled strings, called in favors, made sure she didn't pay a cent, and she got better, or as better as she could get. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 7 years. 7 years of unnecessary suffering because she felt too embarrassed, too poor, too unimportant to ask for help. Rebecca understood that feeling more than she could say. She'd had insurance, had access to doctors, and still couldn't bring herself to seek proper help. It changed something in me, Dr. Rodriguez said, turning back to face them. I started noticing things I'd been blind to before. The way certain patients were treated differently depending on how they looked, how they spoke, whether they had good insurance. The way people suffering from embarrassing conditions were often dismissed or made to feel like their problems weren't real or important enough. She sat back down, and now when she looked at Rebecca, there was an understanding that went beyond doctor and patient. It was the look of someone who'd seen the same kind of suffering and decided to do something about it. I had built this successful practice, made more money than I knew what to do with. I was invited to galas and charity events. I bought expensive things because I could, and all of it felt hollow after meeting Isabella. What was the point of all that success if people like her, people who needed help most, couldn't access it without shame or financial ruin? Rebecca glanced at Michael, whose eyes were fixed on the doctor. They were both completely absorbed in the story. So I made a decision. I sold my Manhattan practice. The building, the equipment, my patient list, everything. I took that money and invested it carefully. I'm not a financial genius, but I had good advisors and I was smart about it. The investments did well, very well actually, well enough that I had the freedom to do what I really wanted to do. Open this clinic, Rebecca said quietly. This clinic and 3 others like it across the city, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. Places where people could come without fear of judgment or crushing medical bills. Where we treat everyone with the same level of care, regardless of whether they can pay full price, partial price, or nothing at all. The fees we do collect help cover costs, but my investments cover the rest. Rebecca looked around the room with new eyes. This wasn't just a clinic. It was someone's mission, their purpose, funded by personal wealth and driven by personal experience. But why not just donate to existing clinics? Michael asked, speaking for the first time in a while. Why do it yourself? Dr. Rodriguez smiled at him, appreciating the question. Because I needed to be here in the exam room seeing patients. Donating money is good, necessary even. But I learned something from Isabella. She didn't just need medical treatment. She needed someone to listen without judgment, to see her as a whole person, not just a set of symptoms or a charity case. She needed dignity as much as she needed medicine. Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes again, but these were different from before. These weren't tears of pain or relief, but of recognition. Dr. Rodriguez understood not just the medical side of her condition, but the emotional weight of it, the shame, the isolation. I wanted to create spaces where no one would feel what Isabella felt, or what you've been feeling, Rebecca, where the housekeeper and the CEO would be treated exactly the same, where having an embarrassing condition wouldn't mean suffering in silence. Does Isabella know? Rebecca asked. About all this? Dr. Rodriguez's smile widened, becoming warmer. She knows. In fact, she works here. She's our patient advocate now. helping other people navigate their care, making sure no one falls through the cracks the way she almost did. She's probably still here, actually. She works late most evenings, says she likes being around when people need help. The idea that the woman whose suffering had sparked all this was now helping others brought a fresh wave of emotion. Rebecca wiped at her eyes, not bothering to hide the tears anymore. "I'm telling you this," Dr. Rodriguez said, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees, speaking directly to Rebecca, "because I want you to understand something important. What you're going through, what you've been too embarrassed to talk about, it matters. You matter, not because of what you do for work, or how much money you make, or anything else. You matter because you're a person in pain who deserves help, and deserves to be treated with respect and compassion." Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice. "And I also want you to know that you're not alone, not by a long shot. The condition you have, it affects millions of women. Millions. But we don't talk about it because society has taught us that certain things are too embarrassing, too private, too shameful to discuss. That silence doesn't protect anyone. It just makes people suffer longer than they need to." Dr. Rodriguez pulled out her tablet and began making notes. "So here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to prescribe something for the immediate pain. Then we're going to schedule a full workup for later this week. We'll run proper tests, get clear answers, and create a treatment plan that works for your specific situation. This isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. Every patient is different." She looked up at Michael. "And you're part of this too if Rebecca wants you to be. This affects both of you, your relationship, your lives together. We have resources for partners, information to help you understand what she's dealing with and how you can support her." Michael squeezed Rebecca's shoulder. "I want to help. Whatever she needs." "Good," Dr. Rodriguez said, standing up. "I'm going to step out and get you those pain medications. While I'm gone, I want you two to talk. Really talk. Rebecca, I know you've been carrying this alone for 3 years, but you don't have to anymore." She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. "One more thing. We have a support group that meets here every Tuesday evening. Women dealing with the same condition you have, sharing experiences, supporting each other. You don't have to come if you're not ready, but I think you'd be surprised how helpful it can be to talk with others who truly understand." After she left, the room felt very quiet. Rebecca could hear her own breathing, feel the steady presence of Michael beside her. She'd spent so long hiding, protecting herself through silence, that the idea of opening up completely felt terrifying. "Beck," Michael said softly. "I'm sorry." She looked up at him, confused. "Sorry for what?" "For not pushing harder, for accepting your excuses. I knew something was wrong. I knew you were pulling away, but I let you. I should have insisted we figure it out together. I didn't want you to know," Rebecca admitted. "I was so ashamed. I thought if you knew the details, the reality of it, you'd be disgusted. Or you'd think I was weak or broken or—" "Stop," Michael said firmly, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. "I married you for better or worse, remember? In sickness and health? Those aren't just words. I love you. Not some perfect version of you, but you, with all your complications and struggles, and yes, even your medical conditions." Rebecca started crying again, but this time Michael pulled her into a hug, careful of her still tender abdomen. She let herself lean into him, let herself be held, let herself start believing that maybe she didn't have to be strong and stoic and silent anymore. When Dr. Rodriguez returned a few minutes later with medication and printed information sheets, she found them still holding each other. She smiled and set everything down quietly on the desk. "Before you go," the doctor said, "I want to give you my direct number. If you have questions, concerns, or if the pain gets worse before your appointment, call me, day or night." "I mean that." Rebecca took the card the doctor offered, looking at the handwritten cell phone number on it. What kind of doctor gave out their personal number to patients? But then again, what kind of doctor gave up a lucrative Manhattan practice to open clinics in struggling neighborhoods? The kind who understood that medicine was about more than just treating symptoms. It was about treating people with dignity, respect, and compassion. As Rebecca and Michael prepared to leave, Dr. Rodriguez walked them to the door. In the hallway, they saw a woman emptying a trash bin, humming softly to herself. She looked up as they passed and smiled, the kind of warm, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. "Good night."
"Isabella,"
Dr. Rodriguez said. "Good night, Dr. R," the woman replied, then looked at Rebecca. "Hope you feel better, dear." Rebecca stared at the woman. This person whose suffering had changed everything, who'd transformed her own pain into a mission to help others. Isabella just smiled and went back to her work, humming that same gentle tune. On the drive home, Rebecca held the information sheets Dr. Rodriguez had given her, along with the business card with the personal phone number. Michael drove carefully, avoiding bumps, occasionally glancing over to make sure she was okay. "That was pretty incredible," he said after a while. "What she's doing, what she's built?" "Yeah," Rebecca agreed quietly. "It really was. You know what else?" Michael added. "You were incredible too. I know how hard it was for you to finally talk about this. I'm proud of you." Rebecca looked out the window at the passing streetlights, each one a small beacon in the growing darkness. For the first time in 3 years, she felt a flicker of something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The kind of hope that comes from being truly seen, truly heard, truly understood. She wasn't cured. The condition wouldn't disappear overnight. There would be difficult days ahead, treatment plans to follow, conversations still to have, but she wasn't alone anymore. And that, Rebecca was beginning to realize, made all the difference in the world. When they got home, the pasta sauce was still splattered on the counter from where she'd dropped the spoon. But instead of feeling embarrassed or stressed, Rebecca just smiled. Michael saw her looking at it and grinned. "How about we order pizza instead?" he suggested. "That sounds perfect," Rebecca said. And for the first time in a very long time, something in their house felt like it actually was. The Tuesday evening support group met in a small community room at the back of the clinic. Rebecca stood outside the door for a full 5 minutes before she could bring herself to turn the handle. It had been 2 weeks since her first appointment with Dr. Rodriguez, 2 weeks of tests and follow-up visits and slowly coming to terms with her diagnosis. The treatment plan was working. The pain was less frequent, less intense, but Dr. Rodriguez had been clear that physical healing was only part of the journey. The emotional scars from 3 years of silence and shame would take time to fade. "You don't have to go in if you're not ready," Michael had told her before dropping her off. "I can come back and get you right now." But Rebecca knew she needed to do this. She'd spent too long hiding, too long pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. So she took a deep breath, turned the handle, and walked inside. 7 women sat in a circle of chairs. They ranged in age from early 20s to probably 60. Some looked comfortable and relaxed, chatting with each other. Others sat quietly, nervously, the way Rebecca felt. At the front of the circle sat Isabella, the woman she'd briefly seen in the hallway that first night. Up close, Isabella had gentle eyes and a warm presence that immediately put Rebecca a little more at ease. "Welcome," Isabella said, gesturing to an empty chair. "You must be Rebecca. Dr. Rodriguez mentioned you might join us. I'm so glad you came." Rebecca sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She felt exposed, vulnerable, even though no one was staring at her or making her feel uncomfortable. It was just the newness of it all, the strangeness of sitting in a room full of people who knew her secret. "We always start by going around the circle," Isabella explained. "You don't have to share anything you're not comfortable with. Just your first name is fine. Some people like to talk about their week. Others prefer to listen. There's no pressure either way." As they went around the circle, Rebecca listened to fragments of stories that sounded eerily familiar. A young woman named Chen talked about how she'd missed her best friend's wedding because of a flare-up. Another woman, Patricia, mentioned how her teenage daughter had started asking why mommy was always tired. An older woman named Violet spoke about finally, after years of marriage, helping her husband understand what she'd been going through. When it came to Rebecca's turn, her throat felt tight. "I'm Rebecca," she managed to say. "This is my first time here. I've been dealing with this for 3 years, but I only started getting real help 2 weeks ago." 3 years is a long time to carry that alone," Isabella said gently. "But you're here now. That's what matters." After the introductions, the conversation flowed more naturally. Women shared practical tips for managing symptoms, recommendations for clothing that helped, strategies for explaining the condition to family members. But more than the advice, what struck Rebecca was the complete absence of shame in the room. These women talked openly about things Rebecca had barely been able to whisper to her doctor. And nobody looked disgusted or uncomfortable. They just nodded, understood, offered support. During a break, Isabella approached Rebecca with 2 cups of tea. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "It's strange," Rebecca admitted. "Good strange, but strange. I've never talked about this with anyone except Dr. Rodriguez and my husband. Isabella smiled. I remember that feeling. The first time I came to a group like this after everything happened with me, I nearly turned around and left 3 times. But I'm glad I stayed. These women saved me in ways that medicine couldn't. Dr. Rodriguez told me your story, Rebecca said quietly. I hope that's okay. Of course it's okay. That's why I work here now. If my story helps even one person feel less alone, then those 7 years of suffering weren't completely wasted. Isabella sipped her tea. Can I tell you something? When Dr. Rodriguez first examined me that night in the hospital, I was so ashamed I could barely look at her. This fancy doctor in expensive clothes, and there I was, a cleaning lady who'd let things get so bad. I thought she'd judge me, think I was stupid or careless. But she didn't, Rebecca said. No, she didn't. She treated me like I mattered, like my pain was important, regardless of who I was or what I did for work. That changed everything for me. Not just my health, but how I saw myself. Isabella paused, then added, that's what Dr. Rodriguez understood that other doctors didn't. When you're dealing with something embarrassing, something society tells you not to talk about, the shame becomes part of the condition. You can't treat one without addressing the other. Rebecca thought about that as the group reconvened. She thought about it during the drive home when Michael asked how it went. She thought about it over the following weeks as she continued her treatment and started attending the group regularly. Slowly, things began to change. The physical symptoms improved steadily. Dr. Rodriguez had created a comprehensive treatment plan that combined medication, lifestyle adjustments, and regular monitoring. But more than that, she'd spent time in each appointment talking with Rebecca about the emotional side of things, about the isolation she'd felt, the impact on her marriage, the way shame had colored everything. Your body and mind aren't separate things, Dr. Rodriguez had explained during one visit. Chronic pain and stress feed off each other. As we treat the physical condition, we also need to address the psychological burden you've been carrying. Otherwise, you'll heal physically but still feel broken emotionally. Rebecca started seeing a therapist the clinic recommended, someone who specialized in chronic health conditions and the mental health challenges that came with them. At first, she'd been skeptical. She wasn't crazy, didn't need a therapist. But after the first session, she understood. The therapist didn't treat her like she was mentally ill. She treated her like someone who'd been through a traumatic experience and needed help processing it. You've been living in survival mode for 3 years, the therapist explained. Constantly managing pain, hiding your condition, isolating yourself to protect your secret. That takes a toll. We need to help you learn how to live again, not just survive. The changes showed up in small ways at first. Rebecca accepted an invitation to Tracy's girls' night for the first time in over a year. She didn't tell her friends all the details, but she did mention she'd been dealing with a health issue and was finally getting proper treatment. Their immediate support and concern made her realize how much she'd underestimated the people who cared about her. Why didn't you tell us? Tracy asked, hurt evident in her voice. We would have been there for you. I know, Rebecca said. I couldn't talk about it. I was too embarrassed. Embarrassed? With us? Another friend, Nina, shook her head. Honey, we've known each other since college. I've seen you throw up in a parking lot after too many margaritas. There's nothing you could tell me that would make me think less of you. The conversation led to revelations from her other friends, too. One was dealing with anxiety she'd been hiding. Another had recently been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. Everyone, it seemed, was carrying something they felt ashamed or embarrassed about. The difference was that now they were talking about it, supporting each other through it. The biggest changes, though, happened at home with Michael. They'd started couples counseling at Dr. Rodriguez's suggestion, working through the damage the years of silence had caused. It wasn't easy. Michael had his own feelings to process, his own hurt from being shut out for so long, but slowly they found their way back to each other. One evening, about 2 months after that first emergency visit to the clinic, they were cooking dinner together. Actually cooking together, something they hadn't done in years. Michael was chopping vegetables while Rebecca stirred a pot on the stove. You seem different lately, Michael said. Lighter somehow. Rebecca thought about it. I feel different. Like I've been carrying this huge weight and someone finally helped me put it down. I'm glad, Michael said simply. I missed you. The real you, not the version who was just trying to get through each day. I missed me too, Rebecca admitted. During one of her regular appointments, about 3 months into treatment, Dr. Rodriguez asked Rebecca how she was feeling overall. Physically, so much better, Rebecca said. The pain is manageable now. I'm sleeping better. I actually have energy again. And emotionally? Rebecca considered the question. It's complicated. Some days I feel great, like I've finally got my life back. Other days I'm angry that I wasted 3 years suffering when I didn't have to. And sometimes I feel guilty. Guilty about what? About all the things I missed. The time I lost with Michael, the events I skipped, the friendships I let fade. I could have gotten help sooner. I could have been brave enough to speak up. Dr. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. Rebecca, you did the best you could with what you knew and felt at the time. Shame is a powerful force. It convinces us that we're protecting ourselves by staying silent, when really we're just suffering alone. You weren't weak for taking time to ask for help. You were human. Isabella suffered for 7 years, Rebecca said quietly. I only made it to 3 before Michael forced me to get help. How did she do it? She almost didn't, Dr. Rodriguez said frankly. By the time I found her that night, she was very close to a medical crisis. Another few months and, well, let's just say I'm grateful I was there. She paused. But here's what I've learned from Isabella and hundreds of patients like you. Everyone's timeline is different. Some people ask for help immediately. Others take years. There's no right or wrong way to get to the point where you can speak up. What matters is that you eventually do. That conversation stayed with Rebecca. She thought about it during support group meetings where new women would sometimes appear. Looking as scared and uncertain as she'd felt that first night, she found herself wanting to help them the way Isabella and the other women had helped her. One Tuesday evening, a young woman named Lily came to the group for the first time. She was maybe 25 and she looked absolutely terrified. When it came time for her to introduce herself, she started crying before she could even say her name. I'm sorry, Lily gasped. I'm sorry, I've never talked about this with anyone. My boyfriend thinks I'm making it up for attention. My mom says I'm too young to have real health problems. And I'm starting to think maybe they're right, maybe I'm just crazy or weak or… Stop, Rebecca heard herself say. Everyone looked at her, including Lily. You're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're definitely not making it up. I know because I felt exactly the same way. I suffered for 3 years thinking something was wrong with me, that I was broken or defective. But I wasn't. I just had a medical condition that nobody wanted to talk about. Lily stared at her, tears still streaming down her face. It took me 3 years to walk through the doors of this clinic, Rebecca continued. 3 years of pain and loneliness and feeling like I was the only person in the world dealing with this. But I wasn't alone. None of us are. And neither are you. Isabella smiled at Rebecca from across the circle, a smile that said she understood exactly what was happening. Rebecca was beginning to heal in a way that went beyond just physical treatment. She was finding her voice, her strength, her ability to help others the way she'd been helped. After the meeting, Lily approached Rebecca. Thank you, she said, for what you said. It helped. I'm glad, Rebecca replied. And I meant it. You're not alone in this. On the drive home, Rebecca thought about how much had changed in just 3 months. She'd gone from someone who couldn't speak about her condition to someone who could offer comfort to others struggling with the same thing. The shame that had defined her for so long was slowly being replaced by something else. Understanding, acceptance, even a sense of purpose. When she got home, Michael was waiting up for her, reading a book on the couch. He looked up when she came in. How was group? He asked. Good, Rebecca said, settling in beside him. Really good, actually. There was a new woman tonight, and I was able to help her feel less alone. Michael put his arm around her. Look at you helping others. Dr. Rodriguez would be proud. I think she would be, Rebecca agreed. She leaned her head on Michael's shoulder, feeling content in a way she hadn't felt in years. The journey wasn't over. She still had appointments to keep, symptoms to manage, work to do in therapy. But she was moving forward now, not just surviving, but actually living again. And that, Rebecca realized, was worth more than all the years of silent suffering. Because on the other side of shame was connection. On the other side of silence was community. And on the other side of isolation was the profound relief of discovering that you were never as alone as you thought you were. The clinic had given her more than medical treatment. It had given her back herself. And now, She was ready to help others find the same thing. 6 months had passed since that desperate evening when Michael had driven Rebecca to the Riverside Specialty Clinic. As she sat in her car outside the building on a Saturday morning, she marveled at how different her life looked now. The pain that had controlled her every decision was manageable. Her marriage was stronger than it had been in years. She'd reconnected with friends and family, but something else had changed too. Something she was still figuring out. She'd started thinking about purpose. Rebecca had worked in marketing for nearly a decade, creating campaigns for products she didn't care about, helping companies sell things people didn't need. It paid well enough, kept her busy, but lately she'd been asking herself if that was enough. If that was all she wanted to do with her life. Inside the clinic, Isabella was setting up chairs for a weekend workshop. Dr. Rodriguez had organized an information session for family members and partners of patients, helping them understand how to provide better support. Michael had already signed up to attend. "Morning, Rebecca," Isabella called out when she spotted her. "You're early. Workshop doesn't start for another hour." "I know," Rebecca said, helping Isabella arrange the chairs in a semicircle. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something." "Sure, what's on your mind?" Rebecca set down the chair she was holding and turned to face Isabella. "How did you make the transition? From being a patient to working here, I mean. How did you know this was what you wanted to do?" Isabella smiled, that warm, knowing smile that seemed to be her trademark. "I didn't know at first. After my treatment, Dr. Rodriguez offered me a job in administration, filing, scheduling, basic office work. She knew I needed better employment than cleaning floors at the hospital. But I kept finding myself talking to patients in the waiting room, especially the new ones who looked scared or embarrassed. I'd tell them a little bit of my story, let them know they weren't alone. And that turned into the patient advocate role. Eventually, yes, Dr. Rodriguez noticed what I was doing and suggested we make it official. She said I had a gift for making people feel comfortable, for helping them feel less ashamed. The truth is, I don't have any medical training. I can't prescribe medicine or diagnose conditions. But I can sit with someone who's scared and tell them honestly that I understand because I've been there too. Rebecca nodded slowly. That's kind of what I've been thinking about. The women at support group, the new ones especially, they seem to respond when I talk about my experience. And I keep thinking about all the people out there who are suffering the way I was, who don't even know this clinic exists or that help is available without judgment. Sounds like you've been doing some serious thinking, Isabella observed. I have, and I keep coming back to the same question. What if I could help more people find their way here? What if I could use my marketing background to reach women who are suffering in silence? Isabella's eyes lit up. Have you talked to Dr. Rodriguez about this? Not yet. I wanted to get your perspective first. I mean, is this crazy? Am I having some kind of crisis where I want to throw away my career? Or, Isabella said gently, maybe you're realizing that having a purpose that matters to you is more valuable than just having a job. Only you can answer that. Later that afternoon, after the workshop ended and Michael had left filled with new understanding and strategies, Rebecca found Dr. Rodriguez in her office. The doctor was reviewing patient files, her reading glasses perched on her nose, looking tired but content. Got a minute? Rebecca asked from the doorway. Dr. Rodriguez looked up and smiled. For you, always. Come in, sit down. Rebecca settled into the familiar chair across from the doctor's desk. She'd sat here so many times over the past 6 months, first as a frightened patient, then as someone healing, and now as something else entirely. I want to help, Rebecca said simply. Not just at support group, but really help. I've been thinking about how many women are out there right now, suffering the way I was, who don't know about this place or don't think they deserve help or are too embarrassed to seek it out. Dr. Rodriguez set down her pen, giving Rebecca her full attention. Go on, I work in marketing, or I have been working in marketing, and I'm good at it. I know how to reach people, how to craft messages that resonate, how to break through the noise. What if I use those skills here? What if we created an awareness campaign that actually talked about these conditions openly, that let women know they're not alone, and there's help available? That's an interesting idea, Dr. Rodriguez said carefully. But you understand the challenge, right? These are conditions people don't want to talk about. Conditions that make people uncomfortable. Exactly, Rebecca said, leaning forward. And that's the problem. The silence is what keeps people suffering. What if we were the ones who broke that silence? Not in a shocking or sensational way, but in an honest, compassionate way that said it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to get help. Dr. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, her fingers steepled under her chin. You know, I've been wanting to do more outreach for years. I've been so focused on providing care to the patients who find us that I haven't put much effort into reaching the ones who don't even know we exist. So you'd be open to it? I'd be more than open to it. But Rebecca, this isn't something you could do as a side project. This would need real time, real commitment. It would mean changing your career path entirely. Rebecca took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been building toward, the decision she'd been circling for weeks. I know, I've thought about it a lot, and I think I'm ready to make that change. My current job pays the bills, but it doesn't feed my soul. This would, helping other women avoid the years of suffering I went through. That would mean something. Have you talked to Michael about this? Rebecca smiled. Last night, he said he's been waiting for me to figure out what I really wanted to do. He's completely supportive, even though it'll mean less income, at least initially. Dr. Rodriguez stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the parking lot where Rebecca had first arrived 6 months ago, doubled over in pain and desperate for help. You know, when I made my career change, everyone thought I was crazy. My colleagues, my family, even some of my friends, they couldn't understand why I'd walk away from a lucrative practice to do this. Did you ever regret it? Not once, Dr. Rodriguez said firmly, turning back to face Rebecca. Not a single day. Because I wake up knowing that the work I do matters, that I'm using my skills and resources to make a real difference in people's lives. That's worth more than any amount of money. She walked back to her desk and pulled out a folder. I've been playing around with some ideas for outreach, but I don't have your expertise. If you're serious about this, I'd like to hire you as our community outreach coordinator. It wouldn't be a huge salary, at least not compared to what you probably make now, but it would be enough to live on, and you'd have complete creative control over how we reach out to the community. Rebecca felt her heart racing. This was really happening. I'm serious. Completely serious. Then let's do it, Dr. Rodriguez said, extending her hand across the desk. Welcome to the team. They shook hands, and Rebecca felt something click into place inside her. This was right. This was what she was supposed to be doing. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca gave notice at her marketing firm and dove headfirst into her new role. She spent hours researching health communication strategies, studying campaigns that had successfully destigmatized other medical conditions. She interviewed patients at the clinic with their permission, gathering stories and insights about what had kept them from seeking help and what had finally brought them in. One afternoon, she sat down with Lily, the young woman she'd comforted during her first support group meeting. Lily had been coming regularly now and was doing much better, both physically and emotionally. Can I ask you something? Rebecca said. Before you came to the clinic,